Hello, welcome back to a commentary channel. I vary content. It can be about anything, but lately I've uploaded stuff about me, and today is another day that Granny Jem tells another story about her life. This time I'm going to talk about just about days at high school. So I went to high school. Grade 8 was 1974. 1974, Brisbane had very bad flooding. The worst flooding in about 100 years. And because of flooding, school was delayed. So it was delayed 2 weeks. And my parents pushed for me at school to be academic. My mother wanted me to be a doctor because she, when she was growing up, that's what she wanted, but she only made it to grade 11 before she left and worked in a medical lab. Now, my school was called Indooroopilly. Indooroopilly is in Brisbane, and Indooroopilly is an Aboriginal word for near the Black Swamp. So I went to Indooroopilly High State School. Now, the year before I went to Indooroopilly, I read in a newspaper that this was a bad school. There were drugs at this school and a lot of other things that made me absolutely terrified. So when I started grade 8, I was really a good girl. I really minded my P's and Q's. But towards the end, I was in 8D. And 8D became known for being the worst class to have. It gave teachers nightmares because we were notorious for mucking up. In fact, we would throw things, we just misbehaved. And when we had classes, so if you had an English class, you might be in one room, and say you had maths period, that would go to another classroom. And later times, I had class, I don't know what it was for, but it was in a certain room, wooden desks, and we always carved our names. Yeah, we had graffiti. We carved our names into the desk, but it used to be a desk where you could flip up the lid, and underneath you could put your books. And this was the time of flared jeans and Hawaiian looking shirts, and also of I also wore very short shorts. In fact, at high school, when I wore my sports uniform, I used to hitch up my skirt to show off my legs because I thought my legs were my best feature. Anyway, just before I started school, so I started school in 1974. In 1973, they were still teaching Latin, and so my mother got me ready to learn a bit of Latin. But in 1974, when I started in grade 8, they took it away, and you only had a choice of French or German. So I chose German because for science, and Germans at the time were the best for science. Later on, At the end of grade 8, I had to wear braces for my teeth. I had quite a lot of teeth pulled out because they said I had too many teeth for my mouth, and I'm going to show you, look how crooked my teeth are. So the braces did jack crap. And my parents paid thousands of dollars for me to have braces. Also, I had kyphosis and scoliosis. Kyphosis is when they both are to do with curvature of the spine, but one is when you straighten up, you can see the curve, and the other one is when you're hunched, you see the curve. And I think it's the scoliosis is when you're hunched, and my back went like that. Anyway, they picked that up when I was 14. I used to, as a child, I had bouts of pneumonia several times, and I was a very sickly child. I had my tonsils out at 15. I was very sickly, got pneumonia like that. Anyway, at the age of 14, they decided that your bones aren't supposed to meld together in your back until you're about 21. But I was maturing a lot quicker, and they didn't have much time. In fact, they were starting to meld at 14. So they decided that they were going to put a body cast. This is plaster of Paris, and I wore it from up here, just above my breasts, to just above the pelvic bone. And I wore this plaster for 2 years. Every 6 months, they would put the saw and take it off. And the smell, because you can't have a bath when you're wearing plaster. So, and it used to get hot and itchy, and my father would pour vinegar down there, and I'd have to get like a comb to try and scratch. But you can't have a wash because you've got plaster. So my parents used to, from memory, I'd wash my hair over a basin and just have to wash my arms and legs. And anyway, there were a couple of periods in between where I didn't have a plaster on. And before I got this plaster on my back, which was grade 9, you've got to remember, I was a very skinny girl. I was one of the tallest girls. I think I was the 5th tallest girl in the whole school. I matured very early, and I had long hair that reached way past my bottom, and my mother used to tie it up in plaits and double it up, so it was doubled up like that. And because my name was Josette, I get Josie or Joe. And as I've explained before, they used to sing Josie and the Pussycats, long hair in great big plaits. Josie and the Pussycats is a cartoon. Anyway, when I was in grade 9, there was a bunch of girls who just clicked. And I thought they were really pretty. You know, the popular girls. You know, you've all heard the story of the nice girls who are not so nice, who pick on and bully the weakling. You've heard the story. And I, being the ugly duckling, I had like sweat pimples. So braces, sweat pimples, skinny, long hair in plaits. My hair was a light kind of auburn, and I got picked on. What happened, and I'm still traumatized to this day, is that a bunch of girls got together and they told me that this guy, who was a hottie, you know, a good-looking guy, had a crush on me. And feeling ugly and worthless, I didn't believe it. But they kept pushing and pushing and pushing. So I wrote a letter to a pen friend of mine, and I said this guy had the hots for me. One of the girls found the letter. I was the laughing stock. So it was Mean Girls. You know Mean Girls? Anyway, when I got to grade 12, guess what? I was Miss Popular. Yeah. So the ugly duckling did turn it around. But I can remember 13, 14, going to my mother, crying, saying, "Why are these girls so pretty and I'm so ugly?" And my mother would say to me, "You'll get your time. When they are fading, you'll blossom." And I'm still waiting. Mum, you lied. I'm still waiting. Maybe I'm going to be a drop-dead, gorgeous, hot 80-year-old. Anyway, in this story, I'm not going to talk about my family life because you all know that I came from a toxic, dysfunctional family life where my father was an alcoholic, a gambler, and he abused me. I ran away from home 3 times. The first time I ran away from home, I was 14, and I got picked up by a guy who was high on coke, taken to this club in East Brisbane, run by Yugoslavian men. And I don't need to tell you what happened. The oldest man was 60. Let's just say they were pedophiles, what they did to me. And I stayed there for a couple of days, and then I decided I'm going to go to the police and just tell them the whole story. One of the guys talked me out of it, so I went home and just made up this story. I've been at a friend's place instead of, because I was so scared to tell them that these Yugoslavian men had sex molested me. I was too frightened. My parents couldn't accept that the problems were at home. You know, my father had been abusing me from the age of 10 to 17. Anyway, they couldn't accept that the problem was at home, so they presented me to the headmistress who didn't like me, and I had to take one of those cards around to all the teachers to be marked whether I was a good student. I got glowing reports. Anyway, when I was 16 and I ran away from home again, child welfare stepped in, and my mother threatened to send me to boarding school, and I was going, great, send me to boarding school. When I went back to a reunion, a school reunion, this was I was in my early 40s when I went back for a school reunion, and I thought I'd been the child that I thought I was all in my head, because that's not how the teachers remembered me. They remembered me as a very studious, good Christian pupil, and I wasn't. I wagged school, and I never once got into trouble. I got away with it. I forged notes, and I would jump in grade 9 when I wagged school. I would jump on a train with a friend, and we would go up to Ipswich, and it would take about an hour to go up to Ipswich from Indooroopilly, and we'd spend all day there chatting up the young railway guys, you know, who worked at the station, and getting up to mischief. And also at high school, I got involved with gangs, and these were the Oxley boys, because I lived at Oxley at once. I lived at several different places. First, I always went to Indooroopilly High School, but when I first started Indooroopilly High School, I lived at Taringa, then Oxley, and finally Graceville. But when I lived at Oxley, I hung around with the Oxley boys. Unfortunately for me, they didn't see me as one of the boys. Even though I was a tomboy, they saw me as a piece of meat, and I had been gang raped so many times. Sorry, I was going to tell you about school. Anyway, we get to grade 10. Finally, at 16, the back plaster came off. But anyway, I'm at grade 10, and I had missed a lot of school for genuine reasons because I had been really ill. And it was a parent-teacher night, and we're going into grade 11, and my parents were warned not to push me into the pure science because I had missed too much school and I would have trouble. But what had happened is when I was in grade 7, which is the last year of primary school, the teacher had told my parents, "You've got a genius on your hands and she's just too lazy." So my parents didn't take heed of the teacher's warnings, and they put me into pure academic. I failed physics and chemistry and had to change all my subjects in grade 12. The funny thing is, years later, when I went to university and I did Einstein's theory of relativity at a third year level at university, I got a distinction. Maybe I am a genius. Maybe I was lazy. I don't know. I also know that I was at high school, very good at English. Never got less than 18 out of 20 for a creative essay. And my teachers thought I was going to be the next Stephen King because all I would write was horror stories. I loved my horror stories. I was very good at it. I am an author now. You can find my books on Amazon. Gem Amber Stone. Look up Gem Amber Stone. I've written over 20 books. Most of them are non-fiction. And when I was going to school, I would also write stories, local paper, and win competitions there too. The last thing I want to tell you is that we did not get calculators till grade 10, till I was 15. You had to do sums, long division. I bet half of you out there can't do long division. And one thing I could not do, I was totally dyslexic, is geometry. Angles, shapes, and area. You put a complicated shape in front of me, I don't know, it all looks a mess to me. It's like I have dyslexia, but it's dyslexia with geometry. And if you said, this angle is at such and such degrees, find the angle at, above my head, but come to algebra, I was a genius. I loved algebra. Abstract algebra, yep, that was up my alley. And even though I failed chemistry, years later again, I studied Western herbal medicine, which you had to do biochemistry. Guess what? Got a distinction. So if my parents had paid heed, maybe I would have done better at school. And in grade 12, I could hang around with anybody. I was known as Miss Popular. I ran for school leader thing. It was rigged, but it didn't matter. I got in the student council, and I used to, every now and then, I also got converted when I was 16 to Christianity. after running away from home so many times, I found campus life. Anyway, I'm running over time, so I might have to do a part 2 if you want to know more about my teenage years and about high school. And our markings, how we were marked, is 1 was a fail, 7 was a high distinction. So if you got a 4, that was a pass. And it was broken up even more into like 4A, 4B, and 4C. And yeah, and there was a teacher. Oh, one last thing. In grade 12, I was sick one day and missed doing an exam. So I came back and I sat the exam, and I was expecting to get a 7 for English, and I only ended up with a 5. And it was because they couldn't find this missing exam that I had sat. And I remember going to the teacher, and she said, "Oh, it doesn't matter about your overall score for university, so don't worry about it." And I should have. So if ever that happens to you, this teacher just didn't happen to like me. Query it, because you are worth that mark. You earned that mark. And computers didn't come in till, after I left school. I think they came in the year after 1979. I learnt computers when I was in my 30s, old DOS. All right, so that's Gem's high school years. And just one last thing. Remember I said about the mean girls? Years later, I looked at photographs of me, and I wasn't as ugly as I thought I was. And those girls were not half as pretty as I thought. So I hope this is a lesson that, everybody's beautiful. Everybody. Love, light, and blessings. Thanks for watching, and I will see what part of my life I'll do next. But before I go, I met my first husband when I was 16. He was 17, and he went to Oxley High School. But he was a bit of a, he played up with all the girls, and very popular with all the girls. One day I walked into his bedroom, and on his bedroom wall he had written all these girls' numbers, phone numbers, in pencil. So while he went upstairs to have a shower, I rubbed them all out, didn't I, with rubber, thinking I was done a wonderful thing, ha, you can't ring them now, Barry. Well, Barry came down and he told me, ha, the joke's on you, Joe. They're all up here in my mind. I remember. He went on to become a doctor, and that marriage ended when I was 26, had 2 children with him. So that's Gem's high school years. I didn't have any close friends. When I lived at Oxley, as I said, hung around the gangs. At school, there was no girls who lived close to me. And I used to catch a train every day to school. And they weren't electric trains either. Electric trains didn't come out till I was, grade 11. That's 16. So there you have it. I used to catch a train to school from Oxley, and my mother used to make us, every morning we'd have housework, and I would do the washing, clean, and we had the old washing where you had the roller, so to spin and get the water out, it would go through this roller, and sometimes your clothes would get caught. Showing my age, aren't I? All right, I've said and raved enough. Share in the comments below if anything from your high school has left a mark on you. Thank you. Bye.